The crowd's laughter echoed through the small church as Rebecca Evans stumbled over her wedding vows, her hands trembling so violently that the small bouquet of wildflowers threatened to scatter across the wooden floor. She looked up, expecting to see judgment in the eyes of the man standing beside her, but Nathan Miller only smiled, his weathered cowboy hat held respectfully against his chest as he stood tall and proud next to his nervous bride. It was the summer of 1876 in Wildwood Creek, a dusty town in the Arizona Territory that had sprung up like so many others during the Silver Rush. The heat was oppressive, causing beads of sweat to form along Rebecca's hairline despite the relative coolness of the church's interior. Her wedding dress, a simple white cotton affair with lace detailing she'd sewn herself, felt suddenly too tight, too constricting, as every eye in town seemed fixed on her moment of weakness. "Take your time, Miss Evans," the preacher said kindly, his voice lowered. "Ain't nobody here in a hurry." Nathan's calloused hand found hers, strong and steady. "You're doing just fine, Becca," he whispered, so only she could hear. "Just fine." But they hadn't always been so kind to each other. In fact, their story had begun very differently just 10 months earlier. Rebecca had arrived in Wildwood Creek aboard the westbound stagecoach, a city girl from Boston with nothing but 2 trunks of belongings and a teaching certificate. The position at the local schoolhouse had been her salvation after her father's death left her with mounting debts and no prospects in the East. At 22, she was determined to make her own way in the world, even if it meant traveling to the untamed Western Territories alone. Her first impression of Wildwood Creek had been less than favorable. The single dusty street lined with weathered buildings looked nothing like the promising description in the advertisement. As she disembarked from the stagecoach, her polished boots immediately covered in a layer of fine desert dust, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. "Need a hand with those trunks, madam?" came a deep voice from behind her. Rebecca turned to find herself looking up quite a ways up into the face of a tall man with sun-browned skin and the clearest blue eyes she'd ever seen. His clothes marked him as a cowboy: worn leather boots, faded denims, a simple shirt with a bandana tied loosely around his neck, and a Stetson that had seen better days. "I can manage," she said primly, not wanting to appear a helpless female right from the start. The man's mouth quirked into what might have been a smile, though it was difficult to tell beneath his short beard. "I don't doubt you can try, madam, but those trunks look mighty heavy for someone your size." Before she could protest further, he'd already signaled to a younger man, likely a ranch hand given his similar attire, and the 2 of them were lifting her trunks as if they weighed nothing at all. "I'm Nathan Miller," the tall cowboy said, placing his trunk on the boardwalk. "Foreman at the Triple M Ranch just outside of town. You must be the new schoolteacher." "Rebecca Evans," she replied, slightly flustered by his directness. "Yes, I'm here for the teaching position. Figured as much. Mayor Thompson's been talking about your arrival for weeks." "Town hasn't had a proper teacher in nearly a year." Rebecca straightened her travel-worn skirts. "Well, I intend to rectify that situation immediately. Could you point me toward the schoolhouse? I'd like to assess my living quarters." Nathan's expression changed, a flicker of something like concern crossing his features. "Madam, perhaps you should speak with the mayor first. His office is just down the street." "Is there a problem with the schoolhouse?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Not exactly, but, Mr. Miller, I've traveled for nearly 2 weeks to reach this town. I'm tired, I'm dusty, and I would very much like to see my new home and place of employment. If there is an issue, I'm certain I can handle it." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "As you wish, Miss Evans. This way." They walked in silence down the main street, Rebecca acutely aware of the curious gazes following them. Wildwood Creek wasn't large, but it seemed to have all the necessary establishments. A general store, a saloon, a small hotel, a barber shop, and what appeared to be a doctor's office. She noted with approval that there was also a small church at the end of the street. The schoolhouse, however, was another matter entirely. As they approached the small building set slightly apart from the main street, Rebecca's heart sank. The white paint was peeling, one window was boarded up, and the steps to the front door appeared dangerously unstable. "It needs some work," Nathan said, stating the obvious. "Last teacher left in a hurry when the mining boom started to fade. Town council hasn't had the funds to keep it up properly." Rebecca swallowed hard, refusing to let her dismay show. "And my living quarters." Nathan gestured to a small addition at the back of the schoolhouse. "Through there. It's just one room, but it's got a stove and a pump for water." With determined steps, Rebecca marched up to the schoolhouse, carefully testing each stair before putting her full weight on it. The door creaked ominously as she pushed it open, revealing a single room filled with mismatched desks and benches. A blackboard hung crookedly on the far wall, and the floor was covered in a thick layer of dust. "How many children will be attending?" she asked, her voice sounding hollow in the empty room. "About 15, give or take. Ages 6 to 16. Some of the older boys only come when ranch work is slow." Rebecca nodded, absorbing this information as she moved toward the door that would lead to her private quarters. It was even worse than she had feared: a narrow cot, a small table with one chair, a pot-bellied stove that looked ancient, and a single shelf for her belongings. The room was stifling hot and smelled of dust and neglect. "The town council promised suitable accommodations," she said quietly, fighting to keep her voice steady. Nathan had the decency to look apologetic. "They tend to exaggerate when they're desperate. I told Mayor Thompson he should be honest about the conditions, but—" He trailed off with a shrug. Rebecca turned away, not wanting this stranger to see the tears threatening to spill. She had spent nearly all her savings on the journey west. There was no possibility of returning to Boston, even if she wanted to. "I'll manage," she said firmly, more to herself than to Nathan. "Look, Miss Evans," Nathan began, his voice surprisingly gentle. "My sister Martha runs the boarding house at Trembled Ranch. We've got several women working there, cooks, maids, and such. It would be far more suitable than this place, at least until the schoolhouse can be properly repaired." Rebecca bristled at what felt like charity. "I was hired to be the schoolteacher, Mr. Miller. My place is here with the school." "All due respect, madam, but you can't possibly stay here tonight. The place needs a thorough cleaning at minimum. Let me take you to the ranch for now. You can make your decisions after you've had a proper meal and a night's rest." Rebecca wanted to refuse, but exhaustion and the reality of her situation were quickly overtaking her pride. "Very well, Mr. Miller. I accept your offer of temporary accommodation. But I will be speaking with Mayor Thompson first thing tomorrow." Nathan nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "I reckon you will at that, Miss Evans. I reckon you will." The Trembled Ranch was larger than Rebecca had expected, a sprawling property about 3 miles outside of town. The main house was an impressive 2-story structure with a wide porch, surrounded by various outbuildings, barns, and corrals. A dozen or so cowboys were visible, some working with horses, others moving cattle between pens. "My father started this ranch 30 years ago," Nathan explained as they approached. "Named it for my mother, Margaret Miller. She passed when I was 12, but Pa kept building it up until his heart gave out 5 years back. It's mine and my brother's now, though Nicholas spends most of his time in Santa Fe handling the business end of things." Rebecca was surprised by this voluntary information. Nathan hadn't struck her as particularly talkative during their ride from town. Martha Miller proved to be Nathan's opposite, in many ways: short where he was tall, plump where he was lean, and talkative where he was reserved. She welcomed Rebecca with genuine warmth, clucking over her travel-worn appearance and immediately ordering a bath to be prepared. "Nathan should have brought you straight here instead of showing you that dreadful schoolhouse first," Martha scolded as she showed Rebecca to a small but clean bedroom on the 2nd floor. "Mayor Thompson ought to be ashamed, bringing a refined lady like yourself all the way from Boston without proper accommodations ready." "I don't wish to impose," Rebecca began, but Martha waved away her concerns. Nonsense. We've plenty of room, and it'll be nice having another educated woman around. Most of the girls here are lovely but haven't had much schooling. You can stay as long as you need. That evening, after a bath that had washed away the grime of travel and a hearty meal that reminded her how hungry she truly was, Rebecca sat on the porch with Martha, sipping tea and watching the sunset paint the desert landscape in shades of gold and crimson. "It's beautiful here," Rebecca admitted, surprised to find she meant it. "Different from what I'm accustomed to, but beautiful nonetheless." "It grows on you," Martha agreed. "I was born back east myself, Pennsylvania. Came out here with Pa and the boys when I was just 10. Hated it something fierce at first, but now I can't imagine living anywhere else." Nathan joined them, having shed his work clothes for cleaner attire, though he still carried the scent of horses and leather about him. Rebecca found it wasn't entirely unpleasant. "Miss Evans was just admitting to finding some beauty in our harsh landscape," Martha informed him. Nathan leaned against the porch railing, his features softened by the fading light. "Takes a special kind of person to see past the hardships to the beauty beneath. Most Easterners never manage it." "I haven't conceded to staying permanently," Rebecca reminded them both. "Tomorrow I intend to have a frank discussion with Mayor Thompson about the state of the schoolhouse." "Good luck with that," Nathan said with a short laugh. "Thompson's all talk and no action. Been promising to fix up that schoolhouse since the last teacher left." "Then perhaps it's time someone held him accountable," Rebecca replied crisply. Nathan studied her for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Maybe it is at that. I'll ride into town with you tomorrow if you'd like." Thompson tends to pay more attention when there's a witness to his promises. Rebecca was surprised by the offer. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Miller." "Nathan," he corrected. "If you're going to be staying at my ranch even temporarily, we might as well use first names." "Very well, Nathan. And you may call me Rebecca." Martha looked between them with barely concealed interest, but Rebecca pointedly ignored her curious gaze. She had no intention of becoming entangled with anyone in this remote town, especially not a cowboy, no matter how helpful he might be. The following morning, Rebecca discovered that Nathan's assessment of Mayor Thompson had been accurate. The portly official made grand promises about repairs to the schoolhouse, but became evasive when pressed for a timeline. "Now, Miss Evans, you must understand that our town's resources are limited," Thompson explained, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "The mining boom has slowed considerably, and tax revenues aren't what they once were." "I understand economic hardship perfectly well, Mayor Thompson," Rebecca replied. "However, I cannot teach children in a building with broken windows and rotting floorboards. It's simply unsafe." Nathan, who had been leaning against the wall observing the exchange, straightened up. "Town's got enough men who could volunteer their time, Thompson. What's needed is materials and organization." Thompson blustered. "Well, of course, Mr. Miller, but who would coordinate such an effort?" "I'm already overextended with my mayoral duties and the general store. I'll do it," Nathan interrupted. "I've got ranch hands who can help, and I know every able-bodied man in town. Give me the authority to requisition the necessary materials, and I'll have that schoolhouse repaired within 2 weeks." Rebecca looked at Nathan in surprise. She hadn't expected him to take such an interest in her predicament. Thompson seemed equally startled but recovered quickly. "Well, that's very generous of you, Mr. Miller, very generous indeed. I suppose we could allocate a small budget, write it up properly," Nathan insisted. "I want it official that the town is covering materials. I'm not paying for the town's responsibilities." An hour later, with a signed document authorizing the repairs and a small budget allocated from the town treasury, Rebecca and Nathan exited the mayor's office. "Thank you," she said simply as they stood on the boardwalk. "You didn't have to do that," Nathan shrugged. "Town needs a school. Children need education, it's not complicated. Still, you've taken on quite a responsibility. I've rebuilt barns and bunkhouses. A schoolhouse isn't much different." He looked down at her, those clear blue eyes assessing. "Will you stay at the ranch while the repairs are being done?" Rebecca hesitated. The proper thing would be to find alternative accommodation in town, perhaps at the small hotel. But the practicality of staying at the ranch, where she'd already been made comfortable, was undeniable. "If your sister doesn't mind, I would appreciate staying a while longer." Nathan's mouth curved into a rare smile. "Martha would be offended if you left. She's already planning to fatten you up with her cooking." Over the next 2 weeks, Rebecca found herself settling into an unexpected routine. During the days, she would ride into town with Nathan or one of his ranch hands to oversee the schoolhouse repairs, which were progressing remarkably well. Nathan had indeed managed to recruit a sizable crew of volunteers, and the building was quickly transforming from a dilapidated structure to something respectable. In the evenings, she would return to the Triple M Ranch, where she found herself drawn into the rhythms of ranch life. Martha taught her to make sourdough bread and venison stew, practical skills she'd never learned in her Boston upbringing. The ranch hands, initially shy around the educated Easterner, gradually warmed to her, especially after she offered to help a few of them improve their reading skills during the evenings. And then there was Nathan. Rebecca couldn't quite define how her feelings toward him were shifting. He was still as taciturn as ever, but she began to notice other qualities: his fairness with his workers, his gentleness with horses, his dry sense of humor that emerged in rare moments, and his unwavering reliability. If Nathan Miller said something would be done, it was as good as accomplished. One evening, about 10 days after her arrival, Rebecca found Nathan alone on the porch, staring out at the star-filled sky. The night was cool, a welcome relief after the heat of the day, and the air was filled with the sound of crickets and distant coyotes. "May I join you?" she asked softly. Nathan turned, surprised by her presence. "Of course." She settled onto the bench beside him, leaving a proper distance between them. For several minutes they sat in companionable silence, the vastness of the desert night spread before them. "I never saw stars like this in Boston," Rebecca finally said. "There were always too many buildings, too many lamps." "One of the things I love most about this place," Nathan admitted. "Makes a man feel small, but not in a bad way, just reminds you that your troubles aren't as big as they seem." "Is that why you stay?" "Because of the stars," Nathan considered this. "Partly, this land gets in your blood, but mostly it's because this is home. My father built something here, something worth preserving. You speak of him often," Rebecca observed. "You must have admired him greatly." "He was a good man, tough but fair, taught me everything I know about ranching, about being a man." Nathan paused. "What about your father? You don't mention him much." Rebecca folded her hands in her lap. "He was a professor at Harvard. Brilliant with books and ideas, less so with practical matters like money. When he passed, I discovered he'd accumulated substantial debts. Our house, his library, everything had to be sold." "I'm sorry," Nathan said, and the simple sincerity in his voice touched her. "Thank you." "In some ways, coming west has been liberating. In Boston, I was always Professor Evans's daughter. Here, I'm just Rebecca." "You're not just anything," Nathan said quietly. Rebecca turned to look at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a current of understanding and attraction that she'd been trying to deny. The moment was broken by the sound of the door opening as Martha stepped onto the porch. "There you two are. Rebecca, I've been looking all over. I found some fabric that might work for classroom curtains if you'd like to see it." The spell shattered, Rebecca rose quickly. "Yes, of course, that would be lovely, Martha." As she followed Nathan's sister inside, Rebecca couldn't help glancing back. Nathan was still watching her, his expression thoughtful and perhaps a little wistful. The schoolhouse was completed ahead of schedule, the transformation remarkable. Fresh white paint gleamed in the sunlight, new windows sparkled, and the interior had been thoroughly cleaned and outfitted with repaired desks and benches. Even the teachers' quarters had been expanded and improved, with a new bed, a proper writing desk, and shelves for Rebecca's books. "It's wonderful," she breathed as Nathan showed her through the finished building. "I never expected anything this complete. Wanted to do it right," Nathan said simply. "These children deserve a proper place to learn." Rebecca turned to him, her heart full. "Thank you, Nathan, truly." He ducked his head, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Wasn't just me, whole town pitched in." "Because you led them," she insisted. "This wouldn't have happened without you." A noise from the doorway interrupted them. Mayor Thompson stood there, beaming as if the renovation had been his idea all along. "Miss Evans, I trust you approve of our town's efforts. We're quite proud of what's been accomplished." Rebecca bit back a sharp reply, mindful of the politics involved. "Yes, Mayor Thompson. The schoolhouse is everything I could have hoped for. I look forward to beginning classes next week." "Excellent, excellent. And of course, you'll be moving in immediately." The question caught her off guard. She had become so comfortable at the Triple M Ranch that she hadn't given much thought to moving into her teacher's quarters, despite that being the original plan. Yes, of course," she said, aware of Nathan stiffening beside her. "Perfect. Then we'll announce the school's opening at Sunday's church service. The children are quite excited, you know. Many of them have never had formal schooling." After Thompson departed, Rebecca and Nathan were left in uncomfortable silence. "So you'll be moving to town," Nathan finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's expected of me," Rebecca replied. "The teacher traditionally lives at the schoolhouse." "Right, makes sense." He turned away, busying himself with checking a window latch that didn't need checking. "Martha will be disappointed. She's grown fond of having you around." Rebecca swallowed past the unexpected tightness in her throat. "And I've grown fond of her, of the ranch, of—" She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Nathan looked back at her, and for a brief moment, his composure slipped, revealing something vulnerable in his expression. "You're welcome at Triple M anytime, Rebecca. Don't forget that." Moving into the schoolhouse proved more difficult emotionally than Rebecca had anticipated. Though the quarters were now quite comfortable, the silence after the bustling activity of the ranch was jarring. She missed Martha's cheerful chatter, the good-natured banter of the ranch hands at mealtimes, and most of all, those quiet evening moments with Nathan on the porch. Still, she threw herself into preparing for her students, arranging the classroom and planning lessons for the various age groups. The town children began to stop by, curious about the new teacher from the east, and Rebecca found herself charmed by their directness and eagerness to learn. Sunday arrived, and with it her formal introduction to the entire community at the church service. Standing before the congregation as Mayor Thompson extolled her qualifications, Rebecca scanned the crowd, her heart lifting when she spotted Nathan and Martha in the back row. Nathan met her gaze briefly, his expression unreadable, before turning his attention back to the mayor's speech. After the service, there was a community luncheon outside the church, giving Rebecca the opportunity to meet the parents of her future students. She was in the midst of a conversation with a miner's wife when she felt a presence beside her. "Miss Evans," Nathan said formally, "Martha asked me to invite you to Sunday dinner at the ranch. She says you're getting too skinny on your own cooking." Rebecca smiled, both at the invitation and at Martha's transparent matchmaking. "Please tell your sister I'd be delighted to accept." That Sunday dinner became a regular tradition, a weekly respite from the isolation of her teaching duties. As summer turned to fall, Rebecca found herself watching the clock on Sundays, eager for the moment when Nathan would appear at her door, ready to escort her to the ranch. Her school, meanwhile, was flourishing. The children proved to be quick learners, hungry for knowledge, and even some of the adults in town began to approach her about evening lessons to improve their reading and writing. Rebecca felt useful, needed, in a way she never had in Boston. It was during the town's Harvest Festival in late October that everything changed. The entire community had gathered for a day of celebration, with food, music, and dancing. Rebecca had spent the morning helping with the children's games, and as evening approached, The younger ones were sent home while the adults prepared for dancing. "May I have this dance, Miss Evans?" Nathan asked, appearing at her side as the musicians tuned their instruments. Rebecca hesitated. Dancing together would be a public declaration of sorts, one that would set tongues wagging throughout the small town. But looking up at Nathan, his blue eyes hopeful despite his composed expression, she found she didn't care what anyone thought. "Yes, Mr. Miller, you may," she replied with a smile. His hand at her waist was warm and strong as he led her into a simple waltz. Rebecca was acutely aware of the interested gazes following them, but she focused instead on Nathan, on the surprising grace with which he moved for such a tall man. "You dance very well," she remarked. "Ma insisted we learn proper manners, ranch or no ranch," he replied. "Said being a gentleman had nothing to do with where you lived and everything to do with how you behaved." She was a wise woman. "She would have liked you," Nathan said softly. "Strong-minded, she'd have called you. It was her highest compliment." The music ended, but Nathan didn't immediately release her. Instead, he took a deep breath as if gathering his courage. "Rebecca, I'd like to call on you properly if you'd allow it," her heart quickened. "Properly." "Courting," he clarified, his ears reddening slightly. "I'd like to court you with the intention of that is, if things progress satisfactorily." "Yes," she interrupted, saving him from his uncharacteristic stumbling. "Yes, Nathan, I would like that very much." The months that followed were among the happiest of Rebecca's life. Nathan courted her with the same thoroughness and dedication he brought to everything, bringing her wildflowers when they bloomed in the desert, carving wooden figures for her schoolchildren, and on her birthday in December, presenting her with a delicate silver locket containing a lock of his hair, an old-fashioned gesture that touched her deeply. By spring, the entire town was watching their courtship with approval and anticipation. Rebecca had become a respected member of the community, her Eastern refinement balanced by a newly acquired practical knowledge of Western life. She could now ride a horse with confidence, cook over an open fire when necessary, and even shoot a rifle with reasonable accuracy skills Nathan and Martha had patiently taught her. It was on a picnic in the foothills in late April that Nathan finally proposed. He'd taken her to a secluded spot overlooking the valley, where a small stream created an oasis of greenery in the otherwise arid landscape. "My father brought my mother here when he asked her to marry him," Nathan explained as he helped her down from her horse. "Said it was the most beautiful spot on the ranch, and that only seemed fitting." Rebecca's heart began to race as she realized the significance of his words. "It is beautiful," she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan took both her hands in his expression more open and vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "Rebecca Evans, I never expected to find someone like you in Wildwood Creek. You've brought learning to our children, kindness to our community, and joy to my life. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Nathan. Yes, I will marry you." His kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with a passion that left them both breathless. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Rebecca. Have since that first day when you stood in that dilapidated schoolhouse and refused to give up." "And I love you," she replied, the words feeling both new and entirely natural, "though I did try very hard not to at first." Nathan laughed, the sound echoing across the valley. "I noticed. You're not very good at hiding your feelings, you know. Your face gives everything away." "Only to those who know how to read it," she countered, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw, "and you've become quite the expert." Their engagement was announced the following Sunday, to the surprise of absolutely no one in town. Martha was ecstatic, immediately launching into wedding plans, while Mayor Thompson pompously claimed credit for bringing them together by hiring Rebecca in the first place. They set the wedding date for June, giving Martha sufficient time to prepare while not testing Nathan's patience too severely. The entire town became involved in the preparations, with the women sewing Rebecca's dress while the men built a new cabin on the Triple M property, where the couple would live. The arrangement was a practical one. Rebecca would continue teaching, riding to and from town each day, while Nathan managed the ranch. It was unusual, perhaps, for a married woman to maintain employment, but the town had come to value education too highly to object, and Nathan himself was her strongest supporter. "Your mind is one of the things I love most about you," he told her when she expressed concern. "I'd never ask you to set it aside." And so the day arrived, clear and hot as only a June day in Arizona territory could be. The church was filled to capacity, with every resident of Wildwood Creek and the surrounding ranches in attendance. Rebecca waited nervously in the small antechamber, her simple white dress adorned with the lace she'd so carefully sewn. Martha bustled in for a final adjustment to Rebecca's veil. "You look beautiful, my dear. I've never seen Nathan so happy, or so nervous," she added with a chuckle. "He's been up since dawn, checking and rechecking everything." "I'm rather nervous myself," Rebecca admitted. "It feels so significant." "Marriage is significant," Martha agreed. "But when it's right, it's the most natural thing in the world." She squeezed Rebecca's hands, "And this is right." "I've never been more certain of anything." The music began, a cue that it was time. Martha gave her one last hug before taking her place in the church. Rebecca took a deep breath, clutching her wildflower bouquet, and stepped into the doorway. The congregation rose, all eyes turning to her as she began her walk down the aisle. Nathan stood at the front, tall and proud in his best suit, his cowboy hat respectfully removed. The love in his eyes as he watched her approach made her breath catch, and then it happened. As she reached the halfway point, Rebecca's foot caught on an uneven floorboard. She stumbled, nearly losing her balance, and in her attempt to recover, dropped her bouquet. The flowers scattered across the floor, and a ripple of laughter spread through the congregation. Rebecca felt her face flame with embarrassment, mortified to have made such a spectacle of herself at this most important moment. But before she could bend to retrieve the fallen flowers, Nathan was there, having stepped forward immediately. He gathered the wildflowers, presented them to her with a small bow, and then stood beside her proudly, offering his arm for the remainder of her walk. "I've got you," he whispered for her ears alone. "Always will." The laughter died away, replaced by murmurs of approval at the groom's gallantry. Together, they completed the walk to the altar, where the preacher waited with an understanding smile. "Dearly beloved," he began, and Rebecca felt her nervousness fade away. The crowd's brief laughter no longer mattered. Nothing mattered except the man beside her, steady and true, who had taught her that love could flourish in the most unexpected places. As they exchanged their vows, Rebecca's voice grew stronger with each word, her initial trembling replaced by certainty. Nathan's eyes never left hers, his voice clear and unwavering as he pledged his life to hers. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher finally declared. "Mr. Miller, you may kiss your bride." Nathan cupped her face gently, as if she were the most precious thing he'd ever held. "I love you, Mrs. Miller," he whispered, before sealing their union with a kiss that promised a lifetime of devotion. The church erupted in cheers as they turned to face their community. No longer teacher and rancher, Easterner and Westerner, but partners in all things. Rebecca looked up at her husband, and saw in his smile all the promise of their future together. 5 years later, Rebecca stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching as Nathan taught their 3-year-old son to ride his first pony. Little James squealed with delight as the gentle animal plodded around the corral, his father's strong hands ensuring he wouldn't fall. Martha emerged from the house, carrying Rebecca's infant daughter. "Elizabeth is awake and hungry," she announced, passing the bundle to Rebecca. "And becoming more like her mother every day, so determined," Rebecca laughed, settling into the porch chair to nurse her daughter. "Between my stubbornness and Nathan's, these children never stood a chance of being docile." "The best kind of children," Martha declared with a nod. "Strong-willed and loved." From the corral, Nathan called out, "Look, Becca, James is riding all by himself." Rebecca smiled, watching her son's face light up with accomplishment while her daughter nursed contentedly. Her school had grown to require 2 teachers now, allowing her to work fewer hours since the children had arrived. Nathan had expanded the ranch operations, making Triple M one of the most successful in the territory. But their greatest achievement, she thought, was this: the family they had created, the love they had built day by day through challenges and joys alike. From that first meeting outside the stagecoach to this moment of domestic contentment, they had written their own story, one that had become woven into the very fabric of Wildwood Creek itself. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan looked up, meeting her gaze across the yard. His smile, still capable of quickening her heart after all these years, held the same message it had in the church on their wedding day: "I've got you. Always will." And that, Rebecca knew, was worth everything.